Welcome back to Pathways of Hope. I am Michael Burke, and with me always is.
Chan Hillman.
And Chan is a leading hope researcher in the country who's done a lot of work about fostering, nurturing, developing hope. It's not just a word, it's actually a science. And I think that's great. So, speaking of the science of hope, if you watch the prior podcast, you can learn, about what hope is, how to measure hope, how you can measure hope in yourself. So I wanted to ask you, what are some of the variables that influence hope?
Yeah, so one of the first ones that come to mind is social connectedness. And what I mean by that is it's a fancy way of saying that hope is a social gift, and our ability to have relationships with others is a significant predictor of our ability to have hope. So, it's why I'm such a fan of programs that include mentoring, for instance, and find strategies to identify hope models, people who can model hope in our life. But social connectedness is a significant predictor. Uh, um, I think I'm trying to think of some of the other variables. Gratitude can increase an individual's hope. So we would invite people to maybe keep a daily gratitude journal. And just as a real quick example, invite the listeners to in the evening thinking about three things that you're grateful for. Especially in this time right now, we're faced daily with all of this adversity and stress and horrible things that are happening, or we're afraid of horrible things happening. But if you can end your day thinking about three things that you're thankful for, and keep that journal, it has a way of connecting us to others, right? And hope is, um, from a science framework, we refer to hope as a part of the virtue of transcendence, which is our ability to be connected to something greater than ourselves. So those are really the variables that we would start focusing on, is those that are going to be related to connectedness.
So if you focus on these variables that you just described, you can increase hope in individuals?
Yeah, we can move the needle on it. The question with that is being able to sustain hope once we move the needle. And so, things like one-time, one-shot mentoring programs. We try to find ways to sustain those. Camp Hope, as a good example, started off with a 1 week experience, and then ultimately now has monthly clubs associated with it. At the end of the day, especially for children, but this is true for adults, we have to be able to internalize that we matter, that
Hmm.
we are of value. And this is one of the reasons why I'm kind of interested in the role that faith has to play with hope, because from that component, our faith traditions tend to remind us that we're children of God and we're worthy of that existence and that love. That's just an example.
No, that's great. I think another example is at the camp you mentioned, we do character traits every night where we highlight what a child is, not what they did.
Yeah.
So, like a child who says, I want to go on the ropes course. And for them, actually getting on the ropes course may be too much. That goal may be too big because they're afraid. They're afraid of heights. They're afraid of being off the ground. But what they do is they just put on the harness, and then we reward them for the gift of being able to at least get on the harness. A lot of people, perseverance is a great one. A lot of these kids that we deal with have persevered many things, and to reward them for who they are as opposed to what they've done can really increase hope from what I've seen.
I love that, Mike, because one of the things, especially when you're talking about nurturing hope, um, especially for somebody who's maybe had some struggles in their life, as an adult or a child, and have experienced some real adversity. One of the things that I think we have to remember is that to have hope means that you have to have courage and the ability to start that pathway. it involves that character strength of courage. So I love that you recognize those predictors.
That's great. So I mean, this is really off the top, so if you don't have them, but you mentioned one of them. So courage is a big indicator of hope. Are there some other key words that we should be focused in on when we think
Yeah,
about hope?
so I think things like curiosity, so exploring and rewarding that curiosity, that capacity to wonder. Um, as I mentioned earlier, that social connectedness, social intelligence, empathy is certainly another one, and we know from the research that empathy can be learned. It's not a personality characteristic as well. Self-control clearly also emerges with hope. Their positive psychology identifies 24 character strengths, and so listeners can easily Google positive psychology and find all 24 of those character strengths and their descriptors. All are highly related to our ability to hope, to have hope. But I will just throw this out there that the science of hope demonstrates that of those 24 character strengths, hope is the stronger predictor of our capacity to thrive.
What got you so curious about finding out more about hope? How did you stumble into this?
Yeah, so I actually love this. In retrospect, it's been about 12 years ago that I stumbled into hope. And I've spent the last 20, 25 years really studying the outcomes of human service nonprofit organizations like yours, and looking at the impact or the outcome that your programs have on key stakeholders. Um, and so I had been doing that for quite some time, and I was actually working with an organization here in Tulsa, and we were doing a housing needs assessment for their clients, and their clients are individuals who are diagnosed with HIV, AIDS, but are living in pretty abject poverty. So really struggling with medications, with food, with health, and social connectedness. And during that assessment, I was introduced to a young man named David. And I want the listeners to understand that my interaction with David lasted about 10 minutes. Um, and David introduced me to hope. And it turns out that David was recently diagnosed. He was 19 years old, recently diagnosed with HIV. And he wasn't acting the way that I was trained for him to act, which is looking for depression and anxiety. He actually was talking about his future plans of college and those kinds of things. And in that 10-minute conversation, David changed my world, both personally and professionally, because he taught me that I had spent my entire life, professional life, trying to study and understand what's wrong with people.
Hmm.
And he taught me that what I should be focused on is what's right with people. And David displayed hope, and that was my introduction.
Wow, that's fantastic. What would you say to David today if you had the chance to spend another 10 minutes with him?
I don't think that there are enough words of gratitude that that little 10-minute conversation has allowed me to travel the world. It has allowed me to develop relationships across the country, like with you, that I probably never would have had. His experience and his voice gave meaning and purpose to my own life and experience. That even in my own story of trauma, and that I don't have to be defined by that. So, and that hope is something that can be learned uh, and taught
So
and shared.
and shared. So you
Yeah,
never know when hope is going to enter your life.
very unintentional, but the impact is a magnitude of times greater than my lifetime. The impact that it's having on my grandchildren is phenomenal.
That's great. Chan and our friend Casey Gwynn wrote this book, Hope Rising, How the Science of Hope can change your life. And David's stories in this book. So I encourage you, if you haven't read it, to read it. I encourage you to buy it and share it. It's something that in our community in Shasta, when I came back to work here, sales probably spiked a little bit. I know it's a bestseller in Oklahoma where you live, because it's so important to really learn about this science of hope. Do you have any other hope heroes?
Oh gosh, I have a multitude of people. There are significant figures in my life. If you read the book, you'll read sort of my story, and I think we've talked a little bit about some of it. But my eighth grade basketball coach, science teacher, is definitely a hope hero. He saved my life. With a little interaction that showed me that I mattered. A couple of college professors. Obviously, I'm a professor, so people who are mentors in my life. And then I think there are some key figures in our society that I think embody hope and model hope. I think it's probably cliche, but pretty authentic, that Barack Obama, in his message of hope, pretty influential in my life. So there's too many to,
Yeah, no, that's good.
Yeah.
So if you could sit down and have a cup of coffee with a hope giver, living or past, who would you sit down with?
Yeah, Dale Fuqua. So that's pretty easy for me. He was my major professor in my PhD program, and my PhD is in statistics. But Dale Fuqua was a philosopher, and helped me explore my own existence in a very spiritual way. That also transformed my life. I would love the opportunity to buy David a cup of coffee. But again, that 10-minute conversation, I've never interacted with him since. And to be honest with you, I don't know if he's alive or where he's at. He was homeless at the time that I met him. So, I wish that he's well. So
that's great. Well, I think that's a great way to end this segment, and we'll look forward to our next one. But I think one takeaway from everything you've said today is that choose somebody in your life and let them know they matter, and have a hope conversation with them. Have it with your children, with your spouse. You're all in a small space together. And the very first calls, you said everybody needs their own space. But I think hearing that phrase, "you matter," or actually having that feeling that I matter, can change the trajectory of somebody's life. So thank
that's
you
right.
very much, Chan. I know you got an exciting day ahead of you, and I look forward to the next time we speak. So again, this has been Pathways of Hope. I'm Michael Burke.
And I'm Chen Hillman. It's great to see you, Mike, as always.
Great to see you too. Thanks so much.